Welcome back to Niaga Spotlight, still with me, Tamina Kausji, and today, of course, we're focusing on the digital economy and in particular technology parts, of visiting Professor Silvio Meira as well as Dr. Renato. So let's now move into one area of the digital economy, Renato, that Malaysia has excelled in, which is hyperscale data centers. Now, with the pandemic accelerating this migration to cloud infrastructures, now what can Malaysia do to continue to ensure more continued and sustainable investment?
Well, that's a fascinating area because it also connects with another issue of public policy. For a long time, we had a discussion about the role of a cabotage exemption for development of data centers. If you're going to lay out a large investment, you want to make sure that you are able to service such investment with predictability, with a number of potential suppliers in the world. And then we had a policy that reverted that waiver of cabotage and said, no, you have to use Malaysian registered vessels in order to service those submarine cables. It was one of the rare occasions. I've been in Malaysia for 6 years and 5 governments. It has been one of the
quite
rare
the record
occasions
for every one of us.
that we've seen some of the global companies openly lobbying against that, say that this is going to hurt, we are not going to locate investments and so on. And we've seen how much of Singapore has developed data centers up to the point of exhaustion.
Yes, they're literally coming to Malaysia. I mean, of course, it's to our benefit because we have the land, we have the capacity.
Yeah, and you also have one thing that Singapore won't be able to have, which is the potential of supplying your data centers with green energy. So in a world that values sustainability, where companies need to move, especially large multinationals with RE100 commitments, they want to be able to show that they are reducing their carbon footprint. Malaysia has a great opportunity, and we have seen some of those investments. YTL Group has announced one investment in Johor of being able to locate, and the key difference is actually be able to supply directly with sustainable energy. So you have land, you have the opportunity of doing that, you have infrastructure. If you align the rest of the policies and put that together in a predictable policy, you have a lot of opportunities, a lot of potential in that. We have seen it happening, but it can even go further.
Very interesting insights there. Prof. Silvio, any from your side when it comes to hyperscale data centers, the fact that we're seeing that huge expansion, particularly in the Southeast Asian region, with a focus on Malaysia right now?
Yeah, we have a lot of investment in that in Brazil as well, but it's not in Recife. It's far up north in Fortaleza. 17 of the 20 cables that actually go into Brazil land in Brazil through a city close to Recife, 800 kilometers north, called Fortaleza. But data centers in Brazil are mainly in the south of Brazil, in São Paulo, the hyperscale data centers. But we have an advantage in Brazil already in relation to that kind of market, because more than 85% of the power generation and distribution network in Brazil is already green. And we are investing literally dozens of billions in wind and solar power in the country as well. Of course, because we have quite a lot of sun, quite a lot of wind in Brazil.
Certainly, but making the most of it as well.
Yeah, we're making the most of it. We have in certain regions in the northeast of Brazil, we have, quote, the best wind in the world for wind power generation. And that makes for Brazil to be one of the best places for you to host hyperscale data centers and cloud businesses. But then we have a problem of connectivity in South America, because in South America, Brazil is connected directly to Europe and to the United States, and all the rest of South America is in the other side of the Andes and the Amazon, and they're connected to the west of the United States. And then that has problems of data traffic routing that doesn't make it especially proper for Brazil to compete in the global business of data in hyperscale data centers as we maybe could. We have to work further in connecting the rest of South America and Latin America together so that we can actually play in that market. That's one of one more reason why we decided in Porto Digital that we were going to invest in software and
Sure.
software design and design as a whole.
I think it really did prove to be a wise decision. Thanks for
Yeah.
that, Prof. Renato, now moving into, of course, sustaining a tech park and also avoiding tech talent crunch, such as what Malaysia currently is facing. Now, just some stats here. So 26% of Malaysia's labor force now works as full-time gig workers, with a particular emphasis, of course, on the lower rungs of digitized work, which is, of course, e-writing, as well as delivery services. So how do we actually move up to get that percentage of knowledge workers who will become part of these future tech parks that are already in place, at the same time ensuring even these hyperscale data centers, for example, have a good proportion or at least an equitable division between Malaysians as well as, of course, foreign talent working there?
This is a fantastic question, which actually connects with one dimension that sometimes it's, I would say sometimes it's neglected, which is you need, the density of knowledge workers is critical. So it's not only about the numbers, but actually the density, the agglomeration, the ability, as Silvio mentioned, of meeting people, random serendipity, in a coffee place and so on. Mike Piori and Richard Lester, professors at MIT, they describe the innovation process as a cocktail party. As you have some conversations here, some conversations there, these can lead to a deeper connections, but you always have to have such a place of meeting and encounters. Having people from different backgrounds, different skills is really important. Turns out that if you want to bring talent in Malaysia, it's easier to bring someone from the outside rather than someone that came to Malaysia to be a PhD student or a
Right.
master's student.
Which is also a pity because, I mean, of course, you would be far more localized and understanding of the context that you're going to work in.
It is.
Yeah.
So if you go to the United States, you do a PhD in the United States, if it's in STEM, you get a 3-year work visa and you might
Sure.
be able to stay. If you do the same in UK, Singapore, Australia, you also have opportunities because you know that one, you've invested, society has, through different mechanisms, has invested in the formation of such student. In that person, if they want to stay, it's because it's a good signal. It's like you know the culture, you might have connections, you have something to contribute. So that's an area which Malaysian policymakers would do good to revisit. The ability of actually retaining, create a specific visa for the high quality talent that came to Malaysia to study here and wants to stay, be able to stay in a way that is similar to what happens in countries that attract a lot of and has this density of knowledge workers. Again, United States, UK, parts of Australia, Singapore, and so on. So this is a missed opportunity. It's something that doesn't have a fiscal cost.
Yes.
And it would not hurt local jobs. In fact, it would create, because it would increase the density of knowledge workers. It would make it easier for companies to stay or attract other companies because they would see that you have different pipelines of talent. It's always easier to hire the local talent for a number of reasons. Then you have the talent that came to Malaysia to study, and then only less you would go for a talent that would apply from elsewhere and then come to work in a company in Malaysia.
Yeah, definitely. And also making the most of course, I'll just add, the Malaysian graduates who return from overseas and are still able to, not really able to find jobs that actually match their skill set and also their income requirements. Prof. Silvio, so now let's focus on how Porto Digital was able to build that critical mass so that, you're at this privileged space just 20 years in that companies, international organizations are actually coming to you. You don't have to go out and seek them anymore to come and seek residency at Porto.
In the beginning, of course, it was very difficult because there was nothing. Then
Sure.
you have the kind of chicken egg problem that nobody goes there because there isn't anybody there and nobody,
That's right.
But then what did we do? We have a set of policies, both from the city and from the state, to create incentives for companies to cite their offices at Porto Digital. So we started with tax rebates. You started with a 50% share of the cost of education of people, which
Fantastic.
is critical for software engineering.
Sure.
You have to have people qualified in certain aspects, for example, of information security, soft project quality, coding certain kinds of systems like real-time systems. You don't get necessarily that from your undergraduate course at the university.
True.
And then we had this incentive for people to renew buildings in a historic area. Porto Digital is in the very center of Recife in a land that's protected by the National Trust, protection of historic sites. And then after we got to somewhere like 2,000 or 3,000 people, a few more businesses wanted to go to Porto Digital on their own. When we got to 10,000 people, that was something like 8, 9 years ago, then we lost control of who was going to Porto Digital. We started being surprised by companies that were just phoning us or sending an email saying,
They heard
I
of
have
you.
just arrived
Yes.
at Porto Digital, I want to know what's available here.
Sure.
And now we have these kind of big banking innovation centers that are, kind of arriving at Porto Digital and saying, I want to hire 300 people in 2 weeks. And of course, people are not coconuts. You can't just get 300 coders and designers in 2 weeks. But then we now have programs of higher education and conversion from professions like law, like engineering, in which Brazil has quite a surplus of people and not enough jobs. For example, for engineers, that's a pity in Brazil, but you have a lot of engineers that are not working in civil or electronic engineering because they don't have enough jobs. And for an engineer, and in some cases for a lawyer, because of jobs like legal data officer in many, many companies, it's easier to convert a civil engineer to a programmer capable of running a big project because of the capabilities they already have in handling big projects in civil engineer than to get someone from computer science to train how to run big programs. And also, it's much easier for a lawyer to learn how to program and to understand data and analytics than to get a computer programming to understand the whole complexity of the law profession.
Sure.
So we have these conversion courses, we have training courses, we have under 16-year-old courses for programmers, we have a high school tech training programs for people to leave high school as programmers and designers at Porto Digital and around Porto Digital at the moment. So that we keep attracting more companies and more people. So we have right now the best combination. We attract more companies because we have more people. Recife is the city in Brazil that has the biggest percentage of people studying computer science in all cities in Brazil that have 100,000 inhabitants or more. And exactly because of that, companies go to Recife because we have people, and more people study because companies are going to Recife.
Yeah.
So we have solved the chicken egg problem. And
Definitely.
that's definitely the problem you have to solve. Many people don't want to go to places that don't have enough people.
Absolutely. I think we face a lot of that when it comes
Yeah.
to some of the newer developments in Malaysia.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So if you attack that problem, and that's a human lifestyle problem, it's a vision that there are careers in there, that I have a profession, that it's long term, that's not going to collapse in 10 years and stuff like that. And then you're going to get people. If you have people and you start attracting businesses, then it's all sorted out. It takes 10 to 15 years to make it work. It's not something that you can do in 3 years, in 4 years.
Sure.
Nobody has done that anywhere in the world. When we talk about Silicon Valley today, people say, but in Silicon Valley they did that. Yes, the first company in Silicon Valley is Hewlett-Packard. They started in 1948. And we started to hear about Silicon Valley in 1990 something.
Correct.
So that was nearly 50 years later.
Exactly. And of course, Malaysia's tech park, where we are actually seated right now, still in phase 1 of implementation. But moving on from the synergistic environment that definitely has to be established, Renato, as we close out the discussion, so looking at the fact that, of course, political landscapes change in Brazil as well as in Malaysia, but of course, Porto thrived and didn't just survive, right? So what advice would there be for the Malaysian digital economy landscape, as of course, politics is also so deeply interlinked with business growth when it comes to having institutional memory, at least for what we are trying to build in the digital economy and tech park sector?
Yeah, great question, and it involves different aspects of political economy. Malaysia moved from a dominant party system to one that its elections are very competitive, and in fact, all the time we don't know who's going to be in power.
Sure.
So the governance of state institutions, then they have to provide the independence required to have leaders who are not going to face the risk of being sacked because there was a change in political coalition and so on. So that is moving towards the independence in mandates, in transparency and accountability of the whole governance of many state institutions. That would isolate the noise of politics from the long-term work that is required to promote the structural transformation of the economy. So in different ways, in the Porto Digital governance structure is interesting because it's tripartite. It has government representatives from the city, from the state. It has business representation, different universities. So that is also one model where can draw inspiration. Just as a lot of different things, Malaysia is an inspiration to Brazil, to Argentina, to Nigeria, and so on. We have a lot to learn from other emerging economies. We face similar challenges.
Yes.
We have pockets of efficiency, things that work really well, that dealt with local problems, and that can also serve as models of scaling public policy.
Fantastic. And Prof. Silvio, of course, I would love for us to end the entire discussion by your thoughts on how surviving also shifting political landscapes, and that has also been one of the strengths of Porto Digital's success.
I think just continuing what Renato was saying, Porto Digital is a public policy defined by law, state and municipal law, city law.
Sure.
And this governing body of Porto Digital of 19 people has minority representation of government.
Right.
It's a public policy. It's partially funded by the state and city government of the city of Recife, but they can't decide what's going to be done without the agreement of the representatives of the whole of society interested in Porto Digital, which includes, for example, urban planners. Because it's an urban city technology park.
It has to be a livable city too.
It has to be a livable city. We have, city problems that have to be sorted out there. And it doesn't interest to anybody, including to the state government, to go there and say, do it this way. They fund it. It's a public policy defined by law, but they can't decide what is going to be done without the agreement of the majority of the stakeholders. The state has less than 25% of the votes in the body that governs Porto Digital. So changing the state representatives and the government or whatever it is changes the noise, but the noise is a small percentage of the whole.
Sure.
That made Porto Digital sustainable in the long run. It's a unique case in Brazil, and we have the different cases, all the different cases in which the state technology park was state-owned and run by the state, they all collapsed in the turmoil of Brazilian politics in the last 20 years.
Absolutely. Fantastic. I wish we could go on, but of course, that's the end of our time. Prof. Silvio, Renato, fantastic insights. Thank you again for making time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. And with that, this has been Niaga Spotlight with me, Tamina Kausji. We'll see you next Friday again, of course, with more business analysis and insights. We wish you a productive week ahead. See you then.